Well, thank you so much for watching Morning Live. Now, the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse, OUTA, says that councillors across the country are proposing a salary increase of 6.4% in the 2020-2021 financial year. The organisation says that the City of Johannesburg is one of those municipalities where councillors are proposing a salary increase, this while residents are already expected to pay more for increased tariffs. Now, OUTA has started a public participation campaign to enable residents to have a say in the proposed salary increases and price hikes. Now, joining us to discuss this further is Wayne Duvenage, the Chief Executive Officer of OUTA. And thanks so much for your time this morning, Wayne. Welcome to Morning Live.
Nice to be with you. Good morning.
So let's talk about the rationale behind the campaign that you are proposing. So you say that municipalities across the countries they are essentially proposing salary increases for their councillors. So why is it important for the public to get involved in this discussion?
Well, this specific campaign is around the City of Joburg's one, but you're quite right. Across the country, virtually all municipalities are putting in bids to have their salaries increased. In fact, the whole budget process has already concluded in many of the cities, and we see this ranges anything between 6 and 11 to 12%. I think the reality is that it would appear to us that councillors and municipalities around the country are oblivious to the fact that there's a pandemic out there that has created economic havoc in this country, and they believe that it's just fine to increase their salaries as if there's no economic meltdown, when the rest of the city or the country, many people have lost their jobs or are going to have their salaries reduced, businesses are closing down. And we just simply, as a country, cannot afford this. So while you have an economic meltdown outside of the corridors of municipalities, what we're trying to say to the municipalities is get in touch with reality. You cannot simply sit back and say it's business as usual and go and get these salary increases. You have to tighten your belts. You have to find the money in other areas of managing your municipalities, and you have to reduce the costs of running your cities. You cannot just simply pass these costs on. What is going to happen, as we see in the City of Joburg's budget, is they're having a salary increase of around 844 million rand, and there's an increase in the property tariffs coming to the tune of about 1 billion rand to citizens. This is not on in this day and age.
So why is OUTA specifically focusing on the City of Johannesburg, Wayne?
Because their public participation process is open for comment right now. And we've decided to enable the residents of Gauteng and Joburg specifically to get involved. The problem with many of these increases in our municipal tariffs and fees around the country continue unabated is because the public don't get involved enough. So we've made it easy for them to get involved, to participate, because when the city calls for comments, they need to have a look at these budgets. They're quite complicated, so we've broken it down on our website to show them exactly what is happening. So we see tariffs going up well above CPI. In fact, over the last few years, salaries costs to citizens, because we ultimately pick up these costs, have gone up between 20 up to 20% in Gauteng for the last couple of years. If you look over the last decade, it's well above CPI. And this continuous request for more and more money from its citizens by municipalities and metros should be a thing of the past. We cannot just continue to increase costs. What we like recently is Tito Mbowene's call for zero-based budgeting. It's time to wipe the slate clean and have a look at exactly what you really need as a city. There are so many contracts that have just continuously increased above CPI that need to be reviewed, and the cities need to get into the habit now of running smarter and far more efficiently than they have in the past.
So what do these proposed salary increases for councillors actually mean for ordinary South Africans and citizens of the City of Johannesburg, for example, Wayne?
Well, it means that you and I must pick up the costs. It means that you and I will have tariff increases this year. We see that the 6.5% salary increase just for councillors takes it over I think it's around about 193 million rand, just the councillors' salaries this year. Now, CPI over the last year has been running at 4.1%. Our first question is, why an increase? of above CPI. And in fact, wine increased at all when they know very well that many of our residents are now without jobs that used to have jobs just 3 months ago, or their salaries have been cut. There's certainly no bonuses. Yet we see municipalities and metros, you can bet your bottom dollar that they'll be asking themselves for some fat bonuses come bonus time. We've seen it in City of Johannesburg as well, where bonuses were backdated. And yet the performance of our cities doesn't improve. It goes backwards. And our maintenance and our infrastructure continues to crumble. They underspend on maintenance. So we're asking the cities to make sure that you don't just simply think, well, you can have these salary increases while the rest of the world cannot, and then pass these costs on to us, because we simply cannot afford it. These are the things that spark the tax revolts that are coming and have been happening in many municipalities around the country. It's going to get worse. So we actually have sent a letter to the Minister of OUTA to send a message out to all the MECs of the provinces. Put a moratorium on salary increases for a while. Do not allow increases to come in the form that they are coming, so that the citizens don't have to pick up these added costs.
Wayne, has OUTA established whether the City of Johannesburg or any of the other municipalities, for that matter, actually made any provision in their proposed budgets for COVID-19 associated costs and would therefore be able to carry these increases?
Very little. In fact, in the Joburg City budgets, the COVID-19 is mentioned once. It's some provision, additional provision of about 140 million rand to deal with health matters related to COVID-19. Now, this would suggest that this budget, they really have not applied their mind. You know, in the last 3 months, we know that COVID-19 and the pandemic is here. The lockdown is having an impact on the city, and yet there's very little mention of that. I think there seems to be some reliance on the bailouts that are coming, 20 billion rand or so from National Treasury to deal with this matter. We believe the city should be making sure that it tackles its own budget far more seriously, looks at where it can cut costs, because maybe they don't get much of the 20 billion rand that is coming towards the local government measures to tackle the COVID-19. So we don't believe they've applied their mind. It's almost a case of it's business as usual. Yes, there's a pandemic out there. Yes, we'll put a little bit of money into this matter, but we're going on with business as usual. We're going to increase our salaries. We're going to increase our fees, levies, rates, taxes, and everything to the citizens and let them deal with their problems. They're not really our problems. Well, that's not the way our cities should be running themselves at this day and age.
You say, Wayne, that tariffs will be increased. Do we know which tariffs exactly? Yeah, look, electricity, water tariffs. I know some of those are as a result of Eskom and the water boards that are passing those costs on. That doesn't mean to say that local government cannot look where it needs to tighten its belt. Refuse tariffs, which is wholly controlled by the city, are going up above CPI as well. So I think the simple message is this. But across the board, yes, all tariffs are going up. The simple message we have for local government, metros and municipalities, is if you think that you can increase your salary bills and pass these on in rates increases in property rates increases, which are also going up in Gauteng and Joburg by 5% or 4.9%. If you think that that's okay, we're telling you as residents it's not okay. You cannot simply continue to increase your tariffs. You need to tighten your belts, join the rest of the world, open your windows and realize that your residents, the people who pay your salaries, are suffering, and come to the party. Stop the increases and start by having a 0% increase to salaries for councillors and employees in local government. Wayne, does OUTA believe that this campaign will actually stop the salary increases, and why do you believe that it would have the power to do that?
Well, we believe that the public need to participate. We believe they should go onto the website. All the evidence is there. We've broken down the budget, shown where the increases are. It made it easy for the public to participate. And why we believe it's necessary to participate is the more people that give input to the city, the more the city needs to realize that the public are participating in their public engagement processes. They are talking to them and they're sending a clear message. So we need to get the citizens of the cities, the residents and the towns across the country on board to say to their councillors, we cannot continue with this business as usual situation. So participate. If the city ignores it, if the city says, yes, we've heard and seen your input, but we're going ahead with our salary increases, well, then they must deal with the backlash that comes from residents in the cities going forward. They must deal with the fallout when it comes to lower collections because people just simply cannot afford it. And then we'll have to remind the cities, well, we gave input. You didn't listen. You went ahead and tried to pass on all these increases to your residents. Well, the residents are now paying less. And now how are you going to manage your cities? There's a local election coming in a year's time. And I think this is the time that citizens and residents need to send a message to the people who manage and run our cities. We cannot continue the way they have been managed in the last decade. It's becoming a disaster.
So does that mean that OUTA will be encouraging residents in these municipalities where such increases are approved to embark on a sort of defiance campaign, if you will?
Well, there are defiance campaigns around the country already. Cities are seeing the reduced collection rates. People cannot afford it. So defiance is coming from having a choice between putting food on the table and sending our kids to school or paying increased taxes and rates and taxes and levies. That's the defiance that will happen. It's a natural defiance. But what we are seeing is many organized civil society entities around the country are starting to push back. We've seen it in Makana. We've seen councils being ruled in court as having to be set aside and to leave office. We're seeing residents getting more and more involved in taking over the running of their towns. This is going to become a reality in this country if local government doesn't realize that its business model, its whole funding business model is now an old, antiquated and outdated one. It needs to get fixed. They need to get closer to the citizens of their towns, and they need to start running these towns in the best interests of their residents, not in the best interests of the councillors who have cronies that are employed into situations that tap into and corruptly use ratepayers' money in many of these towns. If you go back just a decade, there was no such a thing as Eskom debt. In the last decade, Eskom's debt has mounted as a result of poor management in our cities. We've seen in many municipalities, people are not filling the positions that should be there. The financial hygiene and financial management of our municipalities and metros has been despicable. And this needs to be fixed. Otherwise, we're going to have more and more collapse. The Auditor General has told us that our cities have collapsed when it comes to financial management. They're on the brink of disaster, quite frankly. And unless we fix this, and unless councillors get closer to their residents, it's going to get worse.
And just a final question, what will OUTA's approach be to municipalities where perhaps the salary increases, the proposals might have already been approved?
Yeah, we know, and we've told them, but that doesn't mean to say that they have to go ahead with them. They can rethink those. You know, many agreements are in place, but agreements can be renegotiated. We are in a crisis as a country. We are in a crisis in our cities and towns. They're on the brink of collapse. This is the time that councillors and city employees need to join the rest of the country, tighten their belts and say, this year and maybe next year, we will not take salary increases. We'll join our residents and reduce the costs. So if they don't want to, they must deal with the backlash that will come from citizens. And that might be in the form of tariff and rates boycotts that will take place in towns and cities around the country. Because, you know, quite frankly, if you don't have the money, you cannot spend the money. And many of our municipalities don't have the money, and yet they're spending money they don't have. Well, that's a disaster. And we're going to see the fallout that takes place between residents and municipalities getting worse and worse. It's already started and it's going to get worse.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Wayne Duvenage, CEO of OUTA, talking to us about having started a public participation campaign to enable residents to have input regarding municipal councillors proposing a 6.4% salary increase while the economy is already strained. And we'll be speaking to Salga CEO Kolile George for their response to what OUTA has to say. And that's coming up in the next half hour. But for now, it's over to Leanne for Headline News.